1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, the books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
That leads into the longest story in it, or longest portion of it, the Fong Reclamation. And it came to me with the idea of how would they rescue the Fornasia hackers from this oil tanker. Now, this is, again, one of those areas where I looked at and I said, yeah, Bridge could maybe be there, but what's he going to do? He's not going to go scuba diving. He's not going to go boarding another ship. He would be better served as literally the facilitator who gets, he talks to the people in charge of this shipment. He first off he finds out that there is a shipment coming from China with more of the little kids, and he says, okay, first off, I want to fuck that up. I want there to be something wrong with that. So he had already been looking into finding some way to stop those shipments. He comes upon he needs someone that's going to betray whoever's running this operation, which happens to be Shin from Asia Town, former Chinese admiral in the Chinese Navy, Admiral Ma. So he's already setting that up when the Fornasia thing comes up. He's like, okay, well, if they're out here, I know that this boat is going across the Pacific. If I can get Shin to detour it, pick up the hackers, and then come back, not only can I fuck up Shin's shipment, but I can get these guys out. He sets the whole thing up, and he has to find someone in Shin's organization that's transporting stuff that would be willing to betray Shin or Admiral Ma or both. That it's a criminal organization. You throw enough money around, it's not a problem, and he has plenty of money. But he does find Fong, and at the end of the book, they have a conversation about why did you pick me. Bridge explains it. I'm not going to spoil that part, but I think it's a pretty good little part. Bridge not only hires the ship to go pick up Fornasia, but on the sly he hires Fong to not only to make sure that happens, but to also make sure that that boat makes it to Los Angeles and gets pulled over and gets caught by the cops. Which again, I played with the timeline a little bit so that we had a couple of pieces of the story that happen after the boat's already reached the shore, and then shows what happened there. So we know that the boat ends up in Los Angeles with the underage kids locked up, but everybody else is dead. We find out how that happened thanks to Fong. Now, in the middle of writing this story, I still was kind of piecing it together as I'm writing it. I came upon the idea of, well, let's just throw a little bit of romance in there. Now, I'm not normally one that throws a lot of romance in there, and I'm certainly not one that just throws in there because it has to be in there. I came up with the idea that one of the hackers might, in transferring them from one boat to the other, they might fall out of their crash and have to make the rest of the trip in the flesh as opposed to in the crash. I made that person a woman, and I was like, well, let's see if we get a little bit of mark, a little bit of spark, a little bit of magic between these two, and it ends up happening as she teaches him better English, and he helps the Fornasia people help Bridge wipe out the rest of the crew and send the ship into the harbor by itself unmanned. I'm not going to toot my own horn and say that I thought it was a great romance story or anything like that, but I liked the kind of interaction of Fong, who's not very, obviously he's not going to show his feelings a lot, and most of his romantic liaisons are going to be with hookers that is provided by Admiral Ma. And so he's very stoic and very within himself. and then this hacker who is a transcendent who does not want to live in her own body. She wants to live, outside of her body in in this virtual world like the Bottle City Boys. And I kind of wanted to play with that whole idea of not wanting, this body horror part of the people who want to live in the virtual world. They're not comfortable in their bodies. They don't want to live in them, because not only because they're not comfortable in their bodies, but also because they think there can be so much more in this virtual world, these virtual worlds that they create, that they can basically create their own universe around them, and everything would be what they wanted. The things kind of almost your ability to experiment with your life. I wrote this in 2015, 2016-ish. And I want to say that was like right on the cusp or right before we had a lot of cultural discussion about gender fluidity, gender identity being decoupled from sexuality, trans people getting more recognition as actual humans as opposed to the butt of jokes and discrimination. Somewhat unintentionally, I wasn't trying to actually make any sort of statement about anything in particular, but I did like the idea of Bottle City Boys leader Pharrell. I kind of like the idea of having him be a man in the virtual world, but a heterosexual woman in the flesh. And the idea that she hated living as a female, living in her body, but it wasn't because she wanted to be a man necessarily physically. She didn't want to go through the transition. She didn't want to go through because that's a very painful, difficult process. Even though she was married, or not married, she was in a relationship with Johnny Cloud, who is the Hollywood starlet's bodyguard for the Bottle City Boys. She wanted to be in a relationship with him, but she wanted him here in the virtual, and he wants her to be a him in the physical. He wanted, and so they have this discussion where they break up at the beginning of the book about basically these two conflicting paths that they want to be on. He wants children and he wants marriage, but he wants it with a man because he's very, very gay and very openly gay, and he has, they have liaisons physically in the virtual world, but not in the physical world, because again, he's not attracted to her physical body as a female. He's attracted to her male persona, Pharrell, and her intellect. I didn't go too deep into it as because again, that discussion about gender fluidity and gender identity wasn't really a big thing when I started writing this, and it's become a larger part of the cultural discussion since then. But I thought with the virtuality of the Bottle City people's lives, and with the Foreign Asia, that they would be able to experiment with sexuality and gender identity more so than you could obviously in your own body. Mal and Fong have this time in the flesh where she can't get in the creche because there's not an extra creche, and he has to try to help them out. And so I didn't want them to just immediately jump into bed, but I did want them to end up in bed and have that be something that could be a potential relationship that we could use that I could use in future books. And as a matter of fact, Fong isn't in the 6th book, but Mal is a little bit, and she talks a bit about glorious experimental possibilities of being living in a virtual world full time. Fong ends up being a character that I really liked. I really enjoyed writing him. He's very, he's very stoic, but you could tell he's holding in a lot of this pent aggression until he can actually do something about it. He's holding in a lot of things, and he's keeping on an even keel, but a lot of things are bothering him. And I thought he was just a real fun character, and I actually want to use him in future books. I'm just not quite sure how. I don't want to just shoehorn him in there. But it's funny, I'm actually finding that with a lot of the characters I've created, I don't want to say background characters, but characters who aren't part of the main story per se, I'm finding I really like writing them. Aristotle is one of them. Masa from Long and the Short Swords is another. I want to write more about the Korean leader of Asia Town, but I just haven't found a reason to do it yet. And of course, Fong is one of those. It's fun to see some of those characters and actually play with them some more. When we get to the end of the book and to the Bat Cave, and I won't give spoilers away too much, we show Mal and Fong and where they all end up, and then we show how Bridge has taken more of a leadership role in the gangland than anyone expected him to take. And they actually call him sort of the sheriff of gangland now. And he's like, I don't want that title, but they say, dude, by doing this, this is what you've become. It doesn't necessarily have a role in the next book. The next book's going to kind of be a weird aside that, it's not an aside, but it's going to be a weird tangent that I'm going to go on. It's going to take a little bit of left field. Came from an idea I had that I thought needed to be done.